Hello and welcome to COVID, Technology and the Future of Work. My name is Matthew Hughes and I serve as the Executive Director of the International Relations Council in Kansas City. On behalf of the IRC and our program partners at the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, thank you for being with us today. For those who may not know, the International Relations Council strengthens Kansas City's global perspective by maintaining an active dialogue around world events, global issues, and their impact on our community. As a nonpartisan educational nonprofit organization, the IRC values informed civil discourse, accessibility, and substance as we work to sharpen our community's 21st century global acumen. We invite you to learn more about the International Relations Council, including other upcoming events and how to join as a member on our website at irckc.org. There you'll find information about the 2021 Berkeley Lecture with former Secretary of Defense Chuck Hagel on Tuesday, March 16th, and the annual World Quest Trivia Night on Thursday, April 29th, along with a host of other lectures, discussion groups, and global experiences from work, home, or wherever you might be. The COVID pandemic has fundamentally changed the nature of work around the world and left employees, employers, and policymakers with significant unanswered questions about what a new normal will be or when it will arrive. But in many ways, 2020's impacts on workforce, production, and economies represent an acceleration of technology trends that were already in place. Today, we are pleased to welcome thought and industry leaders who will help us dive into trends in the future of work, the tangible impact of COVID-19, and what comes next. We do welcome your questions throughout the course of the conversation using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. You'll hear from the KC Chamber at the end of the program, but I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Andrew, Sydney, Laura, and the whole Chamber team for their help in making this timely conversation possible. We are also grateful to our educational partner for today's program, the Bertelsmann Foundation, who among a range of transatlantic priorities helps leaders around the world think about and plan for the future of work. We do have available in the IRC office copies of the Foundation's Guide to the Future of Work. Feel free to be in touch if you'd like to receive a copy, and you can learn more at bfna.org. I'm now pleased to introduce our opening speaker and moderator for today's program, who will lay the foundation and help us navigate the conversation. Jeffrey Brown is Head of Technology Policy for the Bertelsmann Foundation, where he leads projects and thought leadership on artificial intelligence, the future of work, and more broadly, new technologies and their impact on international affairs. He builds networks and platforms to help policymakers, business leaders, and citizens advance innovative strategy and policy for the digital age. His writing and videos have been featured in Axios, Politico, Forbes, and numerous other publications and outlets. He holds an MA in Political Science and European Studies from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Jeff, thanks so much for being with us today. Please take it away.
Thank you, Matthew, for the introduction. And thank you to Matthew and the International Relations Council for the invitation to speak. Matthew, I know that initial conversations about this event happened back in October of 2020, so I'm thrilled that this is finally happening. And also thank you to the Chamber for organizing and co-hosting this event. And of course, to the panelists for helping ground my very abstract thoughts around the future of work in the reality of Kansas City. As Matthew mentioned, my name is Jeffrey Brown, and I work on the future of work and technology policy at the Bertelsmann Foundation in Washington, D.C. And for those who are not familiar with the foundation and our work, the Bertelsmann Foundation is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, transatlantic think tank building bridges between Europe and the United States on a range of digital topics, ranging from trade to the future of work and emerging technologies. So what I've been asked to do today is very, very simple. I'm going to create a funnel from abstract and often contradictory global future of work trends and conversations to how the future of work is playing out at the local level in Kansas City. Because, after all, I think we all want future of work policy that works not just for nation states and academics, but for communities and workers that are confronting this policy challenge. And ultimately, from my perspective, I'm interested in exploring how Kansas City is doing precisely that. So, to set the stage for our panelists, my opening remarks unfold in 4 stages that will hopefully get us to the point where we have a funnel to a local level future of work conversation that is grounded in Kansas City. First, I'm going to briefly boil down global future of work trends and policy discussions. Second, I'm going to discuss the wild card of the COVID-19 pandemic and how it has transformed the future of work debate. Third, I'm going to touch upon how new technologies such as artificial intelligence are being implemented in the American office. And finally, I'm going to showcase some of our projects to highlight core policy dilemmas that states, counties, and cities face as they attempt to build future of work policymaking at the local level. So I have just a few introductory slides prepared to guide my remarks, which I'm now going to share with everyone. So I'd like to start off by summarizing the pre-pandemic future of work debate, because there is a cut between the future of work pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. Pre-pandemic, there was a simple definition around what the future of work was for many of the policymakers and academics working on the topic. It was the impact of technology and automation on jobs, tasks, skills, workers, wages, and more. And it was widely thought that these changes of technology and automation would be incremental and that they would happen over time, that this wouldn't all happen at once, and that policymakers would have the space to develop innovative solutions to the future of work. There were also many differing definitions of what technology and automation actually meant. So for some, this meant robotics in warehouses. For others, it meant cobots working directly with workers on a production line. For others, it meant gig work. For others, it meant artificial intelligence and higher forms of automation. And so starting in 2013, there was the launch of many confusing and wonk-led estimates over the impacts of technology and automation on jobs and tasks. So there was the seminal Frey and Osborne study that I'm sure that some of you may be aware of, that was released back in 2013, that said that 47% of US employment would be at risk by 2030. And then there was another Forrester research study that came out in 2017 that said that 14.9 million jobs would be created in the United States, not lost, created by 2027. And then more recently in 2021, just a couple of weeks ago, McKinsey came out with another report saying that there were tens of millions of more workers who needed to be retrained by 2030. So from our perspective, working in Washington, D.C. on these topics, what we've heard over the past 4 or 5 years is a lot of confusion from policymakers about exactly how do we go about preparing for the future of work and developing policy around the future of work when there are so many contradictory estimates being thrown out regarding task and job loss or job gain and task gain caused by technology and automation. So the future of work conversation was kicked off by a number of countries such as Germany, China, and the United Kingdom, and international institutions such as the International Labor Organization, the OECD in Paris, and the World Bank, who launched policy dialogues. So just as an example, in Germany, the Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs launched a long-term dialogue around the future of work that brought together labor unions, workers, anchor employers, policymakers, and government institutions. They ended up coming out with several different papers. One was a white paper, there was another green paper, but then they also did a series of film screenings across Germany to raise awareness about the future of work and how workers and policymakers could start planet. And then from an international perspective, the International Labor Organization came out with a global task force on the future of work, which came out with a number of recommendations in 2019 about how countries around the world, including countries in Africa, Asia, and South America, could start preparing for the future of work. And so based on the lead that was taken by these countries and international institutions, there was an evolution of the policy dialogue from estimates of job gain and job loss to a focus on job quality, training and reskilling, pathways, job pathways, career pathways, and then conversations about job polarization between high income earners, low income earners, and also the intersection with gig work. And then finally, in 2018, 2019, we ended up with a pretty granular discussion about how we could start building social safety nets around the future of work. And in 2019, we ended up with pressure on policymakers to actually build sustainable policy around the future of work. And this is actually in the United States when we saw the launch of a number of future of work task forces across states such as California, Washington State, and Texas. However, all of that changed with the COVID-19 pandemic. This is an infographic that the foundation released back in early 2020, basically charting estimates for unemployment rates between the United States and the European Union if preventative measures were not taken to staunch the loss in jobs. And so as you can see from the right-hand side of the infographic, there were a number of countries in the European Union that launched programs to basically pay workers to not be unemployed. It was a modified system of unemployment that was granted by a number of countries within the European Union. However, in the United States, we didn't have such a system, so it was estimated that our unemployment rate across the United States would peak at 20.2% in 2020 as the pandemic metastasized across the United States. So now I'm going to touch a little bit on how COVID-19 has changed the future of work conversation because we are in a new reality now. The COVID-19 pandemic brought us from incremental disruption. We thought that the future of work was going to be something that policymakers, labor unions, workers, anchor employers would have time to plan for, and that there would be a very deliberate policy discussion that would happen. However, the COVID-19 pandemic threw all of that into disarray, and we were met with immediate disruption in which many workers found themselves to be unemployed, and employers and workers had to integrate new technologies almost immediately in order to maintain their operations. And so the future of work was warmly embraced by some, so largely mid and high wage workers across the United States. And there are three key trends that we're seeing around the future of work, at least in the United States. The first is a shift permanently, perhaps, to remote work and virtual interactions. And so this is becoming relatively permanent for mid and high skilled workers, but it also happens to decrease demand for low wage workers in, for example, restaurants, retail, and transit. Second of all, there's been a large shift to e-commerce and digital transactions. And so employment in warehousing and storage in the United States actually peaked in February of 2021. There are 1.4 million people in the United States working in employment, working in warehousing and storage in February of 2021, and that's doubled over the past 10 years. And the shift into e-commerce has created other conversations around job quality and then the automatability of these new jobs that have been created in warehousing. As some of you are aware, employment in warehousing and logistics takes place in environments that are largely standardized. So that makes them ripe for disruption caused by technology and automation. Third, we've seen the super spread of automation and artificial intelligence across the United States. Many providers of services have looked to these new technologies as a way of guaranteeing a minimum level of service. to consumers across the United States. And so there's a worry that post-COVID-19, that employers might prioritize automation and investments in artificial intelligence rather than rehiring workers that may have been laid off during the pandemic. So that leaves us in a precarious position in which the lowest paid workers and the least educated happen to be the most vulnerable. And I'm sure that our panelists will touch upon this. And now there's a conversation about how and should we train all of these workers? And there was a McKinsey estimate that came out that said that 25% more workers are going to need to be retrained post-pandemic than pre-pandemic. And so that goes from 37 million workers to 45 million workers. I'm just going to touch on this very, very briefly because I know that we have someone on the panel who's working on precisely this topic, the role of adjusting workplaces, physical workspaces to the realities of the future of work and COVID-19. So this is an article that we wrote back in the spring of 2018 with partners from Autodesk, WeWork, Microsoft, and it was designers and engineers of these firms that were working on integrating artificial intelligence into the American office. So it's a case study on how artificial intelligence is used to boost the productivity of workers. And so if you are going back into a physical office, this could be the new reality that's facing you as a worker. Going back to an office space in which data is being collected on you as you're wandering about the office using IoT, automated HR systems, and then the physical design of office space as well is being created using artificial intelligence. And so in order to tee up the policy conversation that we're going to have with our panelists, I just briefly wanted to showcase some of the projects that we've been working on at the foundation in Washington, DC. And these projects focus on local areas and the future of work, trying to bring these global concepts around the future of work to bear at a local level. So all of these conversations that we've had at the national and international level have been very, very valuable. However, there are two main points to consider. The first is that economic development and workforce development in the United States are largely devolved to local areas. So while the Department of Labor, the Department of Education, and Congress have funding mechanisms that support local workforce boards through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, it is often governors, mayors, city councils, chambers of commerce, employers, and anchor institutions that are left to craft future of work policy and strategy. So starting 3 years ago, we worked with a number of cities and counties across the United States to produce this project called Transatlantic Cities and the Future of Work. The project had two main goals. The first was to raise awareness and share stories of how local areas are preparing for the future of work. And then second of all, we were trying to create policy approaches and stakeholder engagement strategies for cities, counties, and states to use as they build their own future of work policymaking. So I would encourage all of you to go to thefutureofwork.org to explore what we did in some of these case studies. They're based on stakeholder engagements that we did across Las Vegas, Orlando, and my hometown of Riverside, California. They include videos and they also include snapshots of the local workforces and what they're doing to prepare for the future of work. These case studies have also led into state and county level conversations and strategies that are being created around the future of work. And the project has informed future of work task forces that have been created in California, Washington, Texas, New Jersey, and Florida. And then second, I'd like to touch on the 100 Questions project that we've been working on for the past 6 months. The 100 Questions project is intended to boost the quality of future of work policy that we're engaging in, not only as a think tank, but with policymakers from around the world. We're often engaged in myopic policy discussions such as universal basic income, broadband penetration, or tax incentives to learn new technologies and jobs. However, in doing so, in going for just in honing in on one policy solution in particular, we close ourselves off to the range of policy solutions and discussions that we should be engaging in as we're brainstorming solutions for the future of work. And so the 100 Questions Project was an initiative in which we worked with bilinguals drawn from every continent around the world to source a series of questions around the future of work. And this project is also intended to help us be more data-driven in our approaches to work, so that we're actually we're equipping policymakers with the tools and methods that they need to develop sustainable policy at a local level. And so with that, I'm going to kick it over to all of our panelists because as I'm sure that they'll be able to ground a lot of what we've been doing at the Foundation of Washington, D.C. in the realities of Kansas City. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to introduce them by name, and then I'm going to let them provide about a 1-minute introduction. So I'd like to start off with Tanya Madden, who is Senior Director for Emerging Business at T-Mobile.
Thank you, Jeffrey. That was some great context setting, and it's so enlightening to know that there is a mindset shift and we are embracing this new era with open arms. So thank you for the context. Hello, everyone. I'm Tanya Madden. I work for T-Mobile, and I've been with the company for 3 years. I'm based out of Kansas City. I moved here 20 years ago after completing my master's at Oklahoma State University and decided never to leave the city. I just fell in love with this place, the people, and everything about it. I got married here. I had a son here, and now I live with my husband and 8-year-old boy. We recently got a yellow lab who's 1 year old and keeping all of us busy. At T-Mobile, I support the EVP of Emerging Business in strategy building and operational planning. Our team is responsible for a portfolio of businesses that T-Mobile is looking to deliver in the future. So things like high-speed internet, T-Vision, content we sell through our partners' streaming services, and some other opportunities that are very interesting in the ad tech and developer platform space are things that our team dwells in.
Thank you, Tanya. We look forward to hearing from you on the panel. Next, I'd like to have Shonda Atwater introduce yourself.
Hi there, good morning, everybody. So glad to be a part of this panel. My name is Shonda Atwater. I'm a workforce manager at Metropolitan Community College. I came to MCC about 4 years ago to help launch the registered apprenticeship program in the skilled trades. I could say we started out with, I think, 2-3 businesses and maybe 4 apprentices. And to date, we have over 84 in our registered apprenticeship program. And then we support dozens more, almost 150 or so registered apprentices that are in long-term training programs to gain the skills that they need for their future of work. But in addition to that, I also work in the Workforce and Economic Development Division, where we're really trying to build out robust programs to meet both community needs, but also the local economic needs to ensure that we have what we need in place to be a strong economic player across the entire country. And Kansas City is such a unique, amazing place to be, and we have so many opportunities that are coming forward for us that being on the forefront of that and being a leader in that workforce development space is hugely important. And I'm just so proud to be a part of that.
Thank you, Shonda. Looking forward to hearing more about apprenticeships on the panel. That was a big piece of the Orlando case study that we did in transatlantic cities and the future of work. James? Go ahead, you're on mute. Okay.
Okay, great. Yeah, good afternoon. I'm James Pfeiffer. I'm a principal and architect with BNIM. We are a multidisciplinary design practice. We were founded in 1970 right here in Kansas City. And we pride ourselves on delivering just really beautiful integrated environments that hopefully inspire change and enhance people's lives. I've been with the practice for about 18 years. And during that time have been really blessed to work on a wide range of project types, including workplace, higher education and cultural projects, as well as some of our planning work as well. And most recently, I've been working on a new business school for Marquette University in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And just really great to be with you today. Looking forward to the conversation.
Thank you, James. Looking forward to hearing more during the panel. So with that, we are going to engage in a moderated discussion for the next 40 minutes. And so Tanya, I would like to start with you from the perspective of T-Mobile. So COVID-19 has fundamentally changed almost everything when it comes to work, education, and job training. We've shifted quickly to a remote environment for many. This obviously puts increased emphasis on our technological capabilities to keep up with demand. Has the shift in remote work had an impact on our telecommunications infrastructure? And what does the future hold as more industries view virtual workspace as their primary means of business?
Sure. So at T-Mobile, employees are the heart and soul of our company. And at the time of the pandemic, we decided to take every precaution we could to keep them safe. That was our number one priority, and it still is. Since the pandemic began, we have been adapting to new working conditions and environments like everyone else. We are encouraging employees that have the ability to work remotely to continue to do so. And for those that cannot and don't have that option in their job, we are being very supportive and flexible and offering them flexible work schedules, providing additional paid time for sickness or family support or whatever else that they need to take care of. And just to give you an idea, nearly 95% of our care experts are taking calls from customers remotely versus in a call center. And our results have been phenomenal. Most of our employees that are now looking back and seeing how smoothly things are running are wanting the flexibility to work partially remotely, even after it's safe to return back to work. So, you know, it shows us that the things that we put in place are actually working and resonating with our employees. Post-pandemic, majority of our employees were in the office every day, but now they don't need to be. They could pretty much do the same amount and be equally productive sitting in a remote location. And a lot of that has been possible. The shift to this remote working is because of our reliance on technology and virtual connections. And that reliance has been greater than ever before. We did not realize how much a strong and reliable network plays a role in making sure that this process works smoothly. And that's where I feel like the wireless industry is coming out as one of the most essential industries to be able to support this virtual environment. It is crucial for us to have a powerful and reliable network and to invest in our network growth. In fact, we see it as our duty to be able to support this virtual environment through a great and reliable network. And a lot of this, at the start of the pandemic, we saw a huge increase in our network traffic. In fact, we saw some of our messaging and calling and some of the applications like, you know, food delivery, think of educational tools, streaming services, those actually doubled in usage because people were texting and calling them more than ever before. In fact, we all are guilty of group texting and video calling and trying to stay connected with our loved ones because that was the only means to survive in this environment. But what I can proudly say is that even though we had such increased spikes in traffic, our network continued to perform so well thanks to the major investment the company had made in building out the network for unlimited LTE or 4G as we know it, and then continuing to build out the 5G network. And because of that, we were able to continue that level of the fast and quality service that we've committed our customers. And if you, just to give you some context, T-Mobile is America's 5G leader. It is the first and the largest 5G network where it is providing coverage to more people and places than anyone else. In fact, T-Mobile's extended 5G now delivers coverage across 1.6 million square feet in geographical area, and that covers about 280 million people. And to just give you some more context, that's 2.5 times more geographic coverage than AT&T and 4 times more than Verizon. So we are very committed to building out the network. We're just not stopping here. We also have the ultra capacity 5G network, which is about 7 to 8 times faster than our existing LTE coverage. So if you think of the speeds, you're getting upload and download speeds that are 7 to 8 times faster than 4G. And this is available right now in 6 cities, but we will be expanding to many more. Also, as part of the merger with Sprint, we have dedicated spectrum, and we are able to actually have download speeds of 300 megabits per second and up to 1 gigabits in some cases. So you can imagine how fast you are able to do things on such a reliable network and experiencing very low latency, because that's what's critical in making sure our applications and video conferencing and things work in today's environment. So
Thank you, Tanya. It's interesting to hear in the ways in which technology has been able to support worker productivity while a large proportion of the workforce continues to work from home. And I'd actually like to shift to hear about how this has affected physical office space from you, James. So technology obviously plays a role in allowing companies to work remotely, as Tanya explained, but this in turn creates decreased emphasis on office space. As we eventually recover from the pandemic, many businesses will begin to rethink how they utilize their physical office environment. What's been BNIM's experience with shifting to remote work, and have you had to adapt while continuing to allow collaborative work environments? The floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Really good to be with you. So in the midst of all the hardship of the past year, I think that we've been reminded, just how interconnected we all are. And I've been absolutely struck by how generous and creative our people have been through this. And I'm just so appreciative for what everyone has been able to accomplish together. Like probably many of you, I've seen people at times faced with the very, very worst, rising up time and time again to be their very best. And that's been just really inspiring and incredible. One of the big questions we were trying to answer at the outset was, how do we remain connected when we have to send everybody home? And what does it mean from a technology standpoint? Certainly, but maybe more importantly, what does it mean just from a human standpoint? A quick story. So literally within days of our leaving the office about a year ago, a group of some very, very smart, very dedicated colleagues of mine very quickly developed a work plan to accelerate the implementation of what's called BIM 360 across all of our design studios. And so maybe for those who aren't familiar with it, BIM is short for Building Information Modeling. And maybe the best way to describe it, it's a single digital model of a building that everyone, architects, clients, suppliers, builders, and so forth, can work on together. And our practice, has been a leader in this area. And as part of that, we've done some collaborative research with folks like Autodesk, who you mentioned earlier, Jeff, the U.S. Green Building Council, the Lean Construction Institute, and so on. And these partnerships have not only advanced our own work, but have helped transform the work of the industry. And our teams were early adopters of BIM. So we were fairly well positioned or as much as one can be, I suppose, for this particular moment. But back to BIM 360. BIM 360 is a cloud work sharing, design collaboration, and data management tool. And it's built for design teams like ours to improve our ability to deliver really high quality projects for our clients, even more efficiently than ever before. And so with this, teams can collaborate in Revit, which is our preferred architectural design software, anytime from anywhere, regardless of team or partner locations and disciplines. And so our team back in March of last year, worked tirelessly and immediately developed, the file structure for the platform and discussed rollout and training for our project teams just at an incredible clip. And this all happened relatively seamlessly, thanks in large part to the efforts of so many over many months and years prior to this. Normally in the past, it would often take us months, sometimes even years, to make certain decisions. This one took literally about 15 minutes. And so this was an example of quick, informed decision-making, and certainly a mindset that we're going to carry forward as a practice in the years to come.
Thank you, James. I look forward to following up on exactly what clients are demanding, as well as they're looking to keep productivity elevated going forward. Shonda, the next question is for you, and it touches on apprenticeships. So the pandemic has clearly had an impact on jobs across the United States. Unemployment reached some of its highest peaks during 2020, and many displaced workers found a need to think more about career options. This has placed increased emphasis on job training and apprenticeship programs to retool for the workforce of tomorrow. What shifts have you seen in your program, and how has the experience of job training changed because of COVID-19?
Sure, thanks for the question. I've had a long time to think about that answer because it's something that comes up very frequently, almost daily in the work that I'm engaged with at MCC and for all of MCC. On behalf of the community college as a whole, we really had to reshift and look at new ways of educating and serving the community. For the registered apprenticeship program at MCC, we engage primarily in the skilled trades. So we're not an in-office kind of worker. We're not supporting that worker. We're supporting the worker that's out on the floor, that's in maintenance, that's in construction, that is, still that dirt under the fingernails, renaissance of respect towards the skilled trades. We're in that space. And when the pandemic hit, obviously my team and almost all of MCC had to shift dramatically working from home, but the businesses that we were engaged with from the apprenticeship standpoint, 75% of them were considered essential. They were considered essential companies. They were in food manufacturing, food distribution, oil and gas, agricultural goods manufacturing, what have you. So when we were working with those companies, they were in complete disarray and crisis. We had some people that we were working with that were HR having to work from home, running manufacturing facilities and plants and energy and things like that from their place of business. What was interesting is for all of the businesses that we work with in the apprenticeship space, all of the apprentices that were not furloughed, so these were for businesses that were deemed essential, all of those apprentices were also deemed essential to the business. So those businesses, what that tells me is they have that future outlook for the employee that really does care about their career and is willing to continue learning, and they are giving back to the business. They are an important part of the operations of that business. So from an MCC perspective, it was, okay, how do we make this work? How do we support them? How do we ensure that they get the classes and the information and the facilities and the resources that they need to continue to be successful? Because what we're doing does absolutely have an impact on the region. A couple businesses that we work with in that space, General Mills, They produce, 20-pound bags of flour that were going to grocery stores every day. And you remember seeing the headlines about a lack of flour in the grocery store. So we had a direct impact on that. The other businesses that were deemed non-essential had to obviously shut down. And those apprentices and those businesses had to furlough all of their apprentices really at that point in time. So during that time frame, it was, okay, what do we need to do to help the business to get back and to get those apprentices back? And I'm so proud to say that of all the businesses that did have to shut down, we only lost 5 apprentices, which is amazing, right? A lot of those businesses are anchor employers that we work with. So we have a strong partnership with the UAW up at Ford. They were considered non-essential, so they had to shut down. And we worked very closely with those UAW representatives to ensure that their union folks and apprentices were getting what they needed in order to continue moving forward. One of the things that they required was in-person education, in-person learning. You can't teach somebody to weld or to do tool and die or to run a PLC machine from a virtual space. You just can't do it. I mean, we're doing what we can, and we obviously did what we could, but we had to figure out a way to make that back in person. And so working very closely with campus leadership and with the folks that are running the facilities and whatnot, we made it work. We figured out what classes they needed to have to get operational again, and we made those classes happen given social distancing, given all the COVID restrictions. Was it difficult? Absolutely. Did it force us all to work more closely together and to just make it work? Absolutely. And are we better for it? Absolutely.
Thank you, Shonda. It's really interesting to hear about how workers in the Kansas City area have this hunger for retraining and reskilling and how you're meeting that. Tanya, I'd like to shift over to you again. So job training is one aspect of how people find new careers, shift to new careers, as Shonda explained. But access to reliable internet becomes increasingly more important for remote work and job searches. Kansas City, much like other cities across the United States, is dealing with issues around digital inequity. Regardless of whether or not this is a function of affordability, access, or both, what is your perspective from T-Mobile about what can be done to address the digital divide and promote fair access to vulnerable communities?
Thanks, Jeffrey. As many of you probably remember, Sprint kicked off a program called the 1 Million Project in Kansas City back in 2017. And the driver for that program was because we found out that 70% of the teachers were assigning high school students homework that needed to be completed online. And if students didn't have access to the internet, they pretty much faced an uneven play field. And that is where we decided that we will offer free devices and wireless service to 1 million high school students who lack home internet. And then when we transitioned after the merger to T-Mobile, we supercharged that same program and are now calling it Project 10 Million. We pumped in about 10.7 billion into this program and have committed to offer internet service or internet connectivity to millions of underserved student households. So that's our way to bridge that digital divide and make sure that the underserved communities and these students are getting the basic necessity that it has come to today. Project 10 Million is helping not only close the homework gap, but also that digital divide. In 2020 alone, we were able to provide connectivity to 2.5 million student households. And that included a combination of what we did as part of Project 10 Million. And also we reached out to a couple of school districts in different areas and offered them some very nominal monthly plans that had high data usage so that they could provide the connectivity to their students without charging anything back through that connectivity. And especially it is critical in today's day and time, because we were finding out in rural America, broadband is so poor. In fact, the pandemic has actually revealed how sorry the state of broadband in rural America is, and the connectivity there. 5 to 10% of American households that live in the rural areas do not have any provider choice. If they do, it is probably one that they have to pretty much stick with and suck up their service, which is nothing comparable to what we are used to here today. So as a company, we have decided to serve those rural communities. When we heard cases of, parents driving their kids to a McDonald's parking lot so that they can actually have internet connectivity for remote schooling, that just was unacceptable for us. And to us, that was something that we needed to do and provide service for. So we are we launched a home internet pilot last year or throughout 2020, where we also served rural markets or rural households, and we are working aggressively to roll out this service in additional markets. In fact, as part of our merger commitment with Sprint, we committed to provide fixed wireless service to 9.6 million households within 3 years of closing. So by 2023, 9.6 million households would have fixed 5G service, of which 2.6 million will be in the rural households. And in about 6 years, that number would increase to 28 million, of which 5.6 would be rural. So, and the speeds are going to be pretty high there as well.
Thank you, Tanya. Yeah, I know that that's a big debate that's happening up on Capitol Hill right now, is the role of wireless and broadband across the United States. So hopefully we'll see some action on that relatively soon. James, I'd like to shift back to you, if I could, for just a second. So across the United States, businesses are rethinking how they can conduct their operations in a safe and productive environment. Innovative solutions are going to be needed regardless of which industry you're in. BNIM is at the forefront of this change. So what trends or unique solutions have you found or have been requested by businesses to figure out how to best utilize their office space post COVID-19 or during COVID-19?
Yeah, great question, Jeff. First and foremost, we view the workplace as a tool, right, to make businesses stronger and more successful, and hopefully making the world a little bit better at the same time. I think we acknowledge there are certainly some real challenges. So, for instance, in the United States, the average person, I believe, now spends more than 90% of their life indoors in workplace environments. And so we know that these types of spaces can really shape how we live and also represent incredible opportunities to transform a company's culture and the health of their employees. And certainly we all know that absenteeism can increase the cost and complexity of company operations. I think we're understanding that and anticipating that some version of hybrid work is here to stay. There are some real opportunities with moving to some of these new models. There are probably some obvious opportunities, some reduced real estate costs, potentially better productivity and engagement in some areas, and then the ability for a company to possibly even expand their reach a little bit in ways that they couldn't do otherwise. I think we're going to see a decent amount of experimentation as well, which is exciting, perhaps some unlikely partnerships in terms of space sharing and looking for synergistic relationships with other like-minded organizations within the community and beyond, and something that I know we've definitely begun to explore a bit ourselves at BNIM. What the models will ultimately look like, I think, will vary a bit with the company and the sandbox that particular group plays in. What kind of people, what kind of jobs, and so forth. My sense is that the trend will continue toward more collaborative type spaces and really a spectrum of inclusive, really purpose-driven space. so that when you go into the office, it's very much about being together with other people. The idea that people aren't in the office out of sort of obligation, but rather, for a really a strong purpose. I think companies will be trying to understand, what spaces are most valuable to support their mission and values. It could be that there are times when everyone's in the office or very few. Maybe it'll be a project or team-based. Maybe folks get in a rhythm or a cadence as it relates to ideation or preparing for pitches or presentations together. I think we've learned that, when we're doing more solitary work, building our own presentations, writing proposals, those kinds of things, a lot of this work can frankly happen more remotely, and that's totally okay. We can save a little time, we can limit our commute time, help out with our kids and families a little bit more, perhaps help out with an elderly parent, just create a bit of a different kind of balance and flexibility. Just speaking of flexibility, I would just add that the pandemic, I think, has made it pretty clear that both flexibility and adaptability should continue to be incorporated into the workplace moving forward. Designing spaces to be flexible in the short term is important, as we're seeing less rigidity in one, and actually in the place where one actually works. But we're seeing this through strategies like, more flexible furniture, mobile technology, tunable systems in buildings, and so forth. And we're seeing it, I think, in the ways that spaces can transform both in the scale as well as the purpose to be sort of better right-sized. And then finally, just certainly the idea of designing space to be adaptable for future needs and allowing for a building to be easily renovated. And this is probably more of an infrastructure conversation, but at any rate, a lot to consider. But I'm certainly optimistic about the possibilities there.
Yeah, James, and you're touching on what's essential and what is not essential when it comes to tasks. And on that same point, I'd like to shift back to Shonda. So Shonda, the term essential business has taken on a new meaning since the pandemic began. We've categorized certain businesses as necessary to continue moving the United States forward. This places increased emphasis on generating a workforce to supply these industries. Has the pandemic shifted your focus on what or how you train? And what training programs do you think will need to be expanded because of increased demand in the future? I know that I touched upon the massive increase in warehousing and logistics during my presentation, but I'd like to hear your view.
Yeah. Essential workers and essential work. Wow, that really took a hugely different meaning during the pandemic. And we saw that, working with our business partners and hearing the depth of despair between those that were considered essential trying to stay operational, and those that were not considered essential going, oh my gosh, when are we going to come back to work because this is my livelihood? It was really tough to be a service provider on the other side of that and adapting to their changing needs and whatnot. And even talking to some of those students, I truly believe in, I've said this once before and I'll say it again, the renaissance of respect towards the skilled trades needs to continue. It was starting pre-pandemic. I really do believe that, Kansas City as a whole was really starting to put greater emphasis on the opportunities that skilled trades have to offer for young people and the career pathways that young people have going into, skilled trades. And I'm not talking just construction and manufacturing. I'm also talking healthcare. I'm talking IT. All of those different opportunities. But now that the pandemic has happened and people started to kind of see how things were getting categorized and what the importance different occupations have on the economy, I think it absolutely has changed. And the conversation itself has changed, and I think it's changed for the better. We need to continue to have this conversation and expand it out. When I look at data in talking about the future of opportunities, and that's where, Metropolitan Community College and the Workforce and Economic Development Division, where we feel we are leaders in this space, It's really sitting back and looking at the region and talking to our economic development councils and things like that to figure out where the future opportunities are. And warehouse absolutely is one of them. Warehouse and construction are expected to come back at like 6-7% growth once we're coming out of this. That's leaps and bounds beyond several other major industries that we have in the region. So it's sitting down and understanding what is it that we need to have in place to ensure that people are able to get where they need to go. A huge area of need and a huge area of opportunity is serving justice-involved individuals. What is it that they need coming out of the prison system or coming out of poverty and getting into life and family-sustaining jobs? And understanding that, you know, a CDL is a great place to start, but with a CDL, they may need to also have some digital literacy. They may need to have some customer service capabilities. They may need to have lots of different things in order to be successful. And I think that creating that well-rounded person, but also creating a system that allows people to enter and exit where they need to go in order to continue on that pathway of knowledge and gaining, you know, knowledge and education is really going to be important. And MCC is really taking a strong look at that. I think a huge shift that you've seen us in the last couple months show is, you know, the business and technology campus is moving. We're moving it to a location down off of Truth. That's huge. That's massive. We're going to be able to serve so many more people. We're going to have updated facilities. We're going to be able to put programs closer together so that they can figure out how to work more closely together. We're also expanding offerings at some of the other campuses. So really looking to the future and stepping out as a leader in that space is important.
Yeah, and it certainly sounds like you're keeping the Renaissance in the skilled trades going with all the different activity that you have going on. That's fantastic. So I'm cognizant that we just have a few more minutes left for this moderated panel discussion. So Tanya, I'd like to kick it back to you. So having an agile and skilled workforce trained in new technologies is becoming increasingly important because of the COVID-19 pandemic. How do you envision the future of work and what will work look like as it relates to emerging telecommunications technologies?
Absolutely. So as we entered into the pandemic, this was a massive effort to transition all of our back office support to working from home. As I mentioned earlier, 12,000 care experts are now taking calls from their homes versus a call center, and that was all done within a month. We also equipped and trained our sales staff so that they could support or safely support our customers in retail. Our technical teams that were out in the field deploying our network, we needed to keep them safe. And at that point, we all thought it was just a couple of months, but clearly we were all wrong. But what that did is pushed us to anticipate further needs and imagine new possibilities. In fact, that is where we started investing big in emerging technologies like 5G, IoT, Internet of Things, or fixed wireless internet, because that is going to be how we will be doing work going forward. In fact, it's predicted that by 2025, 36 million Americans will be working remotely, which is about an 87% increase from pre-pandemic levels. So you can imagine how much technology support is needed to be able to keep up with that demand. And a lot of the traditional office walls, store walls are all going digital or online. And it is all about flexibility, availability, responsiveness. And if you don't have that, you're late to the game. So that's where technology will become a big catalyst for change, and it'll continue to grow. And it all comes back again to my earlier point about having a very robust, strong, and growing network that will be able to enable and bring all these technologies to life. And it is because of those ultra-fast 5G speeds and low latency that people are expecting today. If you are gaming or autonomous cars or virtual conferencing, there is no scope or room for latency, and that's where the speed of the network is very, very critical. In fact, 5G is the way to go. CTIA is looking at some stats and saying that there will be 3 million new jobs and about 500 billion in economic growth by 2024 that 5G is going to bring about. So that's just incredible. And at T-Mobile, it is my job and my team's job to envision that future and see how best we can support these startups and companies so that we can bring their ideas to life. And we're so excited about building the best network that can not only support broadband, streaming services, but also solutions for marketers and developers.
Thank you, Tanya. I know that I have a list of additional questions that I'd like to ask all of our panelists, but I also have questions flooding in from the audience. So I'm just going to take a few minutes, 3 minutes, to wrap up this conversation and kind of contextualize it in the work that we've been doing at the foundation to catalyze a local level conversation around the future of work. And then we're going to cut to questions from the audience because some of them are quite interesting, and I think that our panelists will have fantastic answers. So in all of your remarks, I think that it was heartening for me to hear how all of you brought up policy puzzles that we've seen in the case studies that we've done across the United States, whether it was Orlando, Riverside, California, or Las Vegas. So I'm just going to touch on 3 big themes that all of you referenced in your remarks. And then I'm going to, after each theme, I'm going to just leave an open-ended question. So hopefully we have further thought after I present these themes. So the first theme that I identified was job training and apprenticeship and the importance of that in Kansas City in building a post-COVID-19 recovery. It was heartening for me to hear how there is true demand from workers in Kansas City for retraining, reskilling, and it shows that you only lost 5 apprentices during COVID-19. It's been a tough time for all workers across the United States, and it says something that you only lost 5 of them during the pandemic. And so I think that it's not just in Kansas City, but across the United States. We do need, Shonda, as you mentioned, a renaissance in skilled trades. And my question is, because this is also something that came up in especially our Orlando case study, is how do we incentivize employees, workers, to participate in their own upskilling and retraining? And then how do we get employers to buy into that as well, especially at the low wage end of the spectrum? The second big trend that I identified was the digital divide and how we can bridge that. So obviously that can be done through the scaling and development of new technologies such as 5G, as you mentioned, Tanya, and you also mentioned the project of 10 million, equipping 10 million people across the United States with some level of connectivity so that they can participate in school, in retraining, reskilling, or work. And my big question is how do we continue to scale that across rural communities in the United States? I know that there's been a big focus on states, cities, counties, and how they're preparing for the future of work. And I know that rural areas need to prepare for the future of work as well. And so I hope that there's more policy discussion up on the Hill about how we can catalyze that. And finally, rethinking what is essential and what is not essential. And James, I think that you touched upon how that's playing out in the physical workspace, how the physical workspace is being modified to adapt to the future of work that's being demanded by workers, and the future of work that's also being created by employers, because there is a need to still have that physical connection for workers where they can unleash their creativity and productivity. And then, so finally, for all of you, one big question that I had throughout the conversation was, what does a concrete future of work policy look like in Kansas City, and who is leading it in Kansas City? Is it the mayor? Is it the Chamber of Commerce? Is it the community college? So those are two big questions that I'll pose to you, and maybe you can touch upon as we answer some of the audience questions. So we have 7 questions at the moment. And so I'm just going to pitch these out there, and I'd like anyone to chime in if you have an answer. I'm not going to put anyone on the spot though. So the first question is, with the long-term shift to work from home for mid and high level workers, what effects do you see occurring in the urban fabric, especially high-rise campus construction? So maybe James, this might be one for you. What effect do you see happening on construction in Kansas City in the downtown core?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. I think what it's done is the pandemic has kind of shined a bright light on our public realm, frankly. You know, the spaces between our buildings, the spaces just outside the door, the spaces, the forgotten places, issues like infrastructure and transportation. How do we connect to one another? I think this is, I was so pleased to hear earlier the topic of the digital divide come up, because I think the pandemic has done a number of things. One of the silver linings it's done is it's sort of revealed, it sort of shined a light on some of the sort of inequities that exist in our communities. And so I think it's a really great question, in the sense that I think it's hopefully it's caused us to sort of, again, shift our priorities a little bit, rethink these spaces in between, how we connect with one another in the public realm, that we all own that. That's collective space that we all sort of live, work, and play in. So I think it's a really important question. It's an important topic, and it's in terms of policy and pushing forward, I think it's something we all need to be really prioritizing and making it an important priority for us.
Yeah, thank you, James. Would anyone else like to chime in on the impact that is going to be felt on construction and the urban fabric? Shonda?
Well, yeah, that's a really good question. I think I'd come at it from a little bit of a different perspective. When everything went virtual and we had to move, so many of our classes to a virtual space, some we could do, some we couldn't do. All of them were virtual at one point in time. But I think that ensuring that students, especially those who have barriers to success, have the resources that they need to be successful in a virtual environment is really important. So that includes not just the technology and not just having the hotspots. I mean, I have a campus issued hotspot because my internet's not the best, but also having the digital literacy in being able to get on a computer and do a virtual, job fair and things like that. Those services and those needs are very real. And we really need to have in place systems to ensure that people have what they need to be successful in this workspace 2.0, much less just from the construction side of things. I think that heavy contractors and whatnot are going to have to think through, what kind of buildings do they need to build that have longevity. I don't know that it takes away building opportunities. It's just going to change how they look.
Yeah. And there's actually a follow-up question that touches on that, Shonda. So it's, is there any large-scale planning that's being done in Kansas City to rethink how excess office space is being repurposed? And so, I know that with everyone working from home, there's been, a rethink about exactly how much square foot businesses need. So is there any, are there any large scale efforts afoot by anyone in Kansas City to rethink how that's being redone? It makes me think about our Las Vegas case study, where several casinos in Las Vegas are trying to think about how they can repurpose their parking garages for use by autonomous vehicles. So if anyone would like to chime in on that one, go ahead. James?
Yeah, thanks. Just trying to find the mute button there. That's good. No, that's an excellent question, and it's been something that I think has been a topic for actually quite some time prior to the pandemic. Is how do we sort of reimagine and transform the existing spaces that we do have throughout each of our respective cities, right? So this is not a new phenomenon. I think now it's a question of it's a scale issue. It's definitely that. And we've seen some really fantastic examples of transformations here in Kansas City of existing office space that I think a lot of folks had written off. And frankly, folks have come in and breathed new life into these places. So I think there's tremendous opportunity. I loved your example about the parking garage, because I think that this has been an area for us. We talk about it as being sort of long life, loose fit approach to buildings, in the sense that, again, I was talking earlier about the ability to transform and rehab buildings for different uses, right? So the more we can do that on the front end of our projects. So we have actually designed parking structures to then be repurposed later for classroom or office use, those kinds of things. And I think we have to continue to think about it in those terms, when the car does start to leave those parking structures, right? When we start to, sort of reposition these places, what happens to that space? So I think it's a really important question, and it's something that I think we really have to tackle on the front end.
Yeah, thanks, James. So the next question that we have relates to leadership. And so the question is what challenges would keep a business from adapting and becoming more flexible? And they say, for example, leaders being stuck in an old style of thinking. So this is, I guess, relates back to policymaking and the future of work. Is there anything in your view, preventing policymakers from thinking about the future of work in creative ways and being stuck in an old style of thinking?
I'd like to take that one or crack at that one. It happens all the time, but there's not an option. There's just not. I mean, when we look at even pre-pandemic data for manufacturing and construction, okay, so these are core industries for the region. It was showing that a 20 to 25% replacement rate for people in those trades are needed in the next 5 years. That data is not just sort of poof made out of nothing. That was very well researched data that has been confirmed within my team when we go out and talk to a business all the time about taking on a registered apprenticeship program for their facility or some kind of workforce program for their business. When we show that data, the next question we get or the next reaction we get is, wait, what? Wait, say that again? So I think that communication and informing people and continuing to put the strain and the need of workforce development and the future of work and the need to continue to retrain on the forefront is going to be hugely important. We have a huge number of people that are in that retirement or close to retirement space that they've worked their entire lives to get where they're at, and they're due respect as well. But they also have a legacy that they need to think about leaving and passing on to somebody else so that we can continue to move forward. And generations work differently and learn differently. It's a dynamic problem with lots of dynamic solutions. And I think just keeping it on the forefront of the conversation is going to be essential.
Yeah, something that's come up in a lot of our work is how do you raise awareness among policymakers and local leaders that this is something that they should be planning for. And so I think that we're not only trying to move from sort of an old style of thinking as the question was posed, it's how do you actually raise awareness that the future of work is a mega challenge that should be planned for. Would anyone else like to chime in, or next question? So the next question is, how has remote work, maybe Tanya, this is one for you. How has remote work affected your ability to recruit within the Kansas City area and any other metros? If you have any information, anecdotal information on that or data on that.
Absolutely. Just to give some context, the emerging business team that I'm part of was actually a new business outside of our core wireless business that T-Mobile had put in place. So a lot of the workforce that we have and the employees we have did come over to T-Mobile from certain acquisitions or partnerships that we had done with smaller companies. But then there were a lot of areas that we were expanding and growing into where we needed to hire new talent. So firsthand, I can tell you that without even feeling the difference of sitting across the table from somebody and actually having a conversation to doing that over video conferencing, we were successful in finding the right talent. You know, just the same process that we would follow if people were in the office to start, you know, the job requisition process, getting a recruiter involved, getting the posting up, and then attracting the right talent. It was so seamless. And to be honest, a part of our team is based out of Kansas City, and then majority is in 5 different locations. And we have never seen each other in person, but it feels like we've known each other for years. And the friendships we formed through just, you know, the virtual interactions has been just amazing. So, you know, to your earlier point, it is just not technology, but also a mindset shift, the human interaction, James, that you had mentioned earlier. That element needs to also play in to make this a smoother process. So from our standpoint, really, I mean, getting the right talent and getting the word out, and people are more comfortable interviewing. We've done panel interviews, we've done one-on-ones, and not even once felt like, you know, we are not getting the focus and attention that we would have in a pre-pandemic environment.
Sure. So you feel as though remote work has actually augmented your ability to work with teams and to recruit, right?
Absolutely. And also it has opened up options to say, I do not need somebody specifically here. If I find the right talent in, say, Denver, that's okay, because this is working fine.
Yeah. Well, I'm aware that we only have a very, very limited amount of time left. So there's one last question, and I'm curious about this because I'm not headquartered in Kansas City, is do you think that the pandemic has helped, in particular, any locally owned businesses? So Tanya, we heard from you about how the pandemic has not necessarily impeded your ability to recruit and to work with teams. But do you, James and Shonda, do you think that there have been any local businesses in Kansas City that have particularly benefited from the pandemic and the ensuing shifts, the future of work shifts that have been caused?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And I say that at least in the manufacturing construction space, Kansas City is so unique, right? We've got the airport on the north in the Missouri side. We have the port on the south in the Kansas side. We are a transportation. We are able to get goods in and out very quickly, very economically, very efficiently. And I think that that the entire region has really grabbed a hold of that and really taken that seriously. The warehousing sector is growing like leaps and bounds. And these are not typical warehousing jobs. These are advanced warehousing operations that include a lot of AI, that include a lot of robotics, that include a lot of, blockchain technologies and things like that. I think we're also being viewed as an even bigger agricultural powerhouse than we were before, and our ability to produce consumer packaged goods and get it out to where they need to be, I think is huge. We have and construction, the construction up in the airport is still continuing to grow, and there's massive construction projects going all around the city. I think that we have a very, very, very bright future ahead of us.
James, would you like to chime in at all?
Oh, that was Shonda nailed it. I mean,
okay.
that was a terrific. And I mean, and MCC, I will say, we're a partner with MCC. We've been proud of that. And to Shonda's point, they are, and just to plug MCC a little bit, they're doing such incredible work for our community and region. It cannot be overstated. And, the fact that they've continued to better, their programs and offerings and facilities during this time has been extraordinary, and I think a real model as well. So just a shout out to Shonda and her team, because they're doing incredible things right now.
So we just have a few minutes left, perhaps 5 minutes, and I'm going to put you in I'm going to put you on the spot to ask my favorite question that I like asking policymakers, not just across the United States, but around the world. And so, very, very briefly, I'm thinking 30 seconds to 1 minute. I'd like to hear from all of you about what you think Kansas City's future of work strategy should look like. What are the top elements that you would include in a Kansas City future of work strategy? And maybe who do you think should be involved in developing that strategy as well? I think that, in Washington, D.C., what we're really focused on is how can we build future of work policy at a local level in partnerships with as wide an array of stakeholders as possible. And so in each city that we've done these case studies, I've been surprised by how different the mix has been and what local leaders prioritize in different places. And so I'd like to hear from you, if it's not too controversial, what kind of your wish list is for the Kansas City future of work strategy, and who should lead it at the end of the day? Anyone? Tanya?
I'll take a stab at it.
Yeah.
One of the things that Kansas City has is so much talent in the entrepreneurial space. That community is so tight, and especially in the tech startup space, there is so much that Kansas City has to offer, and there's so much talent. One thing that we need to be better at is not only developing that talent, but also retaining that talent. A lot of times we see the young entrepreneurs and millennials getting poached and moving on to the coasts, and that's where we need to make a better effort of providing those opportunities first and then being able to retain them. There is so much new growth and mindset that Kansas City has. We just need to have those areas. For example, one of the things T-Mobile does is the T-Mobile Accelerator program that is ran out of the Crossroads Arts District. And that's where it's like an incubator program for startups. They started back in the sprint days, and there are 52 companies or startups that went through this process, and 77% are still in business. And 2 went through successful exits, and we've raised about 45 million in revenue. So if you look at the talent, there is plenty. It's just we need to offer more, collaboration spaces, mentorship, programs, to your point, Shonda, trainings, so that there is the ability to develop and retain that talent. And there are many names that come to mind, but this has to be done at a leadership level. Corporations have to make a genuine effort to promote this. We have a young mayor of Kansas City. He has a very good growth mindset. Like, these are things that need to be taken both at the public and the private level to be able to hone the right talent.
I think, Tanya, I think you're right on. The word I wrote down was diversification. I mean, honestly, we have and I'm not just talking about, racial or cultural diversification. That's hugely important as well. And we need to continue to capitalize on that. We've got so many different people in the region that come from so many different perspectives that can really add to the value of work and the value of our economy. We also have huge diversification in our industries, our core industries that are in the region. I think that is huge. When we go through good economic times and then we go through declines, that diversification helps keep us moving forward. I think also, we've got a really beautiful mix of rural and urban opportunities in the region, and being able to really merge those two together and bring the best values from both of those different perspectives. I think we have, from a leadership standpoint, we also have some great leaders in the region. We've got Mark, Mid-American Regional Council, and we've got Casey Rising that are really focused on this space and are providing resources and information for people to use as a catalyst to pivot where they need to pivot and to grow where they need to grow. I know from a metropolitan community college perspective, we're using them all the time. So I think that we have the tools and we have the keys in place. We just need to continue pushing them forward.
Yeah, and diversification is something that came up, not surprisingly, in two of our case studies, Orlando and Las Vegas. And due to the pandemic, you've recently seen the governor of Nevada, Steve Sisolak, making moves to create a blockchain city within the state as a way of diversifying away from gaming and tourism revenue. James, would you like to follow up at all? Have the last word?
Oh gosh, yeah. Maybe just like a really quick last word, which I was starting to write down keywords as well, like Shonda probably, and the two that I wrote down were equity and access as being huge. And to Shonda's point, there is a lot of really great work that's underway. I'm part of the Downtown Council here in Kansas City. There's a strategic plan that's underway. It's basically a 10-year roadmap. It's going to shape downtown Kansas City. And again, this is another partnership with all the leading civic organizations in the region. So again, it's about partnerships and coming together to really leverage all the great things that this city and region have to offer.
Yeah. Those are excellent final words. Thank you, James. So with that, I know that we just have a couple minutes left. So I'd like to thank all of the panelists for your time today. I had a fantastic time discussing the future of work and what it means for Kansas City. And if you would like to engage with the foundation on any of our future of work projects, whether it's our Transatlantic Cities in the Future of Work project or the 100 Questions project, please feel free to reach out to me directly. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Andrew from the Kansas City Chamber, who is going to provide closing remarks.
Thank you, Jeff. And on behalf of the International Relations Council and the Greater Kansas City Chamber of Commerce, I just would like to thank all those in attendance today. Special thanks to Jeffrey Brown and the Bertelsmann Foundation, and big thanks to our panelists, Tanya, Shonda, and James, for their amazing insight, internationally and more specifically around what's happening in Kansas City as well. As we begin to emerge from COVID-19 impacts here in the region, a lot of these topics we felt would be relevant to things that would be emerging, particularly around workforce and technology. So we hope that you've all gained some greater insight into some of this. We appreciate your time and hope everyone has a great and safe week. Thank you.